everyone, I'm Lauren Pisanik, an OpenSciEd teacher in New Jersey. I'm here to talk through Lesson 13, which is the final lesson in the first lesson set of this unit. So let's get started. Let's take a look at how we got to this point. So in Lesson 12, we added to our understanding of convection by testing different conditions through a student investigation. So we found out that the greater the thermal energy input, the stronger the lift or convection currents. So we can now explain a lot about cloud formation and storms, but we're still wondering why certain storms produce really big hail and others don't. So that's where we're going in Lesson 13. Here's our lesson at a glance. Lesson 13 is a putting the pieces together lesson over 3 days. So while there's no hands-on investigation to prep, it's still good to budget about 30 minutes to review the teacher guide and slides and make the handouts for this lesson. In this lesson, we also refer back to 2 earlier videos from Lesson 1 and Lesson 6. Lesson 13 includes a final model and an individual transfer task assessment. So as we said, Lesson 13 is a putting the pieces together lesson. We're going to take everything we figured out and summarize that together. So on day 1, we take stock of what we know and begin to put our final model together, but we recognize we need more information. So we read an additional article. On day 2, we complete our model and then apply it to some different scenarios. And then on day 3, we apply our understanding to a new phenomenon as an individual summative assessment. So here's a closer look at day 1. So we navigate in by looking back at that tennis-size hail video from our anchoring phenomenon. And then we start to make our final model, but realize while we're making our gotta have it checklist that we need more info about hail forming. So we do a close read of an article and add that information to our gotta have it checklist. On day 2, we complete our models. We figure out that our models can now explain why hail sometimes forms and sometimes does not, right? And we celebrate that and then apply that model to other cases before we individually demonstrate understanding on that transfer task on day 3. So again, this is our final lesson to wrap up that first half of the unit. So it's the end of the lesson set. So we're putting our final model together and we're going to reflect on what we're able to answer, right? We're actually able to answer a lot of our initial questions from the driving question board. Let's take a look at several of the key moments in Lesson 13. In part 2, we're setting the stage for our 3-part final model by focusing on the first piece, that first question of why do clouds form? So we've already figured this out, but it's an important part of the whole story. So we need to include this in our final model, but we don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So we have a scaffold that we give to the students to start with, and then just have them add in additional images or symbols or text if they want to explain more. This is the time to have the students look back at their gotta have it checklist from lesson 10. Great time to go and review those key ideas we figured out. But set a timer and keep this short. 10 minutes is plenty of time for this. In part 3, we pause with our model because in order to explain those other 2 pieces, those other 2 questions, how hail forms in a cloud and how it's getting bigger, we need to add to our gotta have it checklist with what we figured out in Lesson 11 and Lesson 12. So there are a variety of ways that you can facilitate this to best meet the needs of your students. There's a teacher resource completed checklist that is really helpful to have as a guide. It's in the Lesson 13 folder. I personally like to have my students work in small groups. We actually do it on vertical whiteboards to brainstorm what ideas to include, and then we make a whole class list together. And then I like that because it ensures then we all have the key ideas needed for a final explanation. Creating this checklist is key to sense making because we recognize that we're still missing a piece. We still need to be able to explain different hail sizes, and we can't do that yet. So that leads us to part 4. So we're going to revisit those initial photos of hailstones and brainstorm some ideas about why they might be differently. And that sets us up to read a scientific text to figure out more. So the teacher guide suggests that students read independently, but you want to adjust that to meet the needs of your class. Maybe independently works for you, or maybe you want to do it as a whole class or in partners, whatever best meets the needs of your students. And then we're going to add the new ideas, those new concepts we pull from the article to our Gotta Have It checklist. I also find that the discussion prompts that are suggested in the teacher guide make a great independent review too after we've had our discussion. And that lets the students just practice a little bit more. The students are going to use these new ideas to finalize their models on day 2. In part 7 of this lesson, which is now the 3rd day, students are going to apply everything they figured out to a new phenomenon, a hurricane. I found this to be a pretty challenging transfer task for my students. So there's a variety of modifications that you might want to try or that you just might want to consider. So adding in sentence starters for the open-ended responses or adding in a checklist of components for the model portion can help some students have a place to start. We've also in our class given kids the opportunity to talk this over as a class first or to talk this over as small groups first before finalizing their individual thinking. I find it helpful to look over the answer key provided as I consider how I might modify an assessment to meet the needs of the specific students. There's not really any materials to manage in this section other than deciding how to facilitate the final model with your students. The words currents, downdrafts, and updrafts were words we encountered in lesson 12. We're now going to move them to words we've earned and put them on our word wall. Hurricane becomes a word we encounter. We do refer back to our consensus models that we've developed so far. They're very valuable in this lesson. The students create group final models. We don't create anything as a whole class, but it can be really helpful to choose at least one of those models to save that you can then display or refer back to during the second half of the unit if you choose to. That's it for lesson 13. We have figured out a lot. And now we're ready to move on to the second lesson set of this unit, which is going to shift our focus to larger scale precipitation events. So the students will experience a new anchoring phenomenon in lesson 14 to set them up for this exploration. So check out the next video for more information on lesson 14.